so I am going to do a video on, is America turning into Babylon back in the day in the Bible? So I listened to a video by Pastor Mark Driscoll, and he was talking about the similarities between America and Babylonia that we read in the book of Daniel. And I thought it was very interesting, the comparisons and the common things that we share. So the first thing that Babylon does when they come into your country is when they take you over, they take you out of your own country and bring you back to Babylon, and they settle you in one of the provinces that wasn't originally your own. So they cross borders, and they want basically you to lose your national identity. And that's exactly what's going on in America today. We're being attacked on our national identity from all sides. We're having people brought across our borders to be settled here to change our national identity. And our national identity is being messed with all over the West. And this is going on in Europe and Canada too. All the Western nations are having mass immigration, and they're trying to change the national identities of these countries to make it into a one world national identity. So this is the same thing that Babylon does. They figured out that that's how you control people, is you can't let them band together. Then the next one he said was Babylon would close churches. They would come in and they would make you stop your religion and do whatever their religion is at the time. Whatever they're worshiping, you have to then respect and worship. And sometimes they would take your religion and mix it in with theirs, and other times they would just say, no, your religion doesn't intertwine with ours. It won't mix in. So here in America, what are they doing? They're attacking churches. During COVID, they were shutting down churches. They will persecute and shut down churches in the future. This is coming. Just be ready for it. But it's already, the warm-up has already happened. The next one is they control the schooling, which is indoctrinating the youth. So when Daniel was brought in, he and his friends were put through school in the palace under the eunuch that was in charge of them. They were fed, they were supposed to be fed the right food, and that's a whole other thing. But they were put through schooling so they would learn the way Babylonians did things, their history, and they would learn to speak the language. And then they changed their names. They didn't call him Daniel, they called him Belteshazzar. So they renamed all of them. So they're trying to change them into Babylonians, these smart youths that were princes from Israel. All right, and then the next thing they do is, so here in America, there's indoctrination going on in our colleges where they take young adults and they start teaching them the ways to think, and that everything they've been taught that's classic by their parents is wrong, and the world isn't really like that. They need to make a new world. So again, total indoctrination through our colleges is going on with the youth. Then the next thing they do is they cancel prophets or cancel the truth. Okay, so if a prophet came from Israel into Babylon and he was telling about the one true God and these other gods aren't real, they would kill him, just flat out. They would put him to death. And so they don't want to hear the truth. They want to hear their own truth. And that brings us to number 5, that's counterfeit prophets, or the Magi. Okay, so their prophets read the stars like horoscope readers and would always tell the leader good news and positive things. They would never tell them anything bad was coming. Okay, it was always rosy and nice for them. So the Magi were false prophets who just made up horoscopes, and the prophets like Daniel were actually able to tell the truth to the king, even if it was not always positive. The king came to respect because he was the only one who would tell them the truth. But there were other times when Daniel and his friends told the truth, and they were almost killed for it, but God had to save them. So again, what are we doing in our culture? The people who tell the truth are canceled, and they're silenced. They're taken, if you tell the truth, you're taken off social media posts, your algorithm's held back, and you're shut down to where people can't hear you. And then the people that reinforce the narrative that the government, the Babylonian government or United States government wants, is reinforced and spread out there. We're the most propagandized culture in history. It's worse than Germany was back in the 30s when Adolf Hitler took over. Okay, we are so propagandized. We are hit from every direction by propaganda put on screens in front of us. Okay, and the worst thing is most people don't even realize they're being propagandized. They come out and like nobody. Some of us are cynics, and we go, "Wait a second, that thing they told us back in the past. Now that I think about it, they're saying now that that's not true. Wait a second, they were lying to me." There are millions of people in America who never put those two things together, who never can sit there and say, wait a second, using my memory, what they're saying to me today versus what they said a few years back that they told me was the God's gospel truth, they are now saying the opposite of. Like, oh, now it's okay to say that it's a lab leak theory. A couple of years ago, you said, I think this came from a lab instead of a wet market. You were annihilated online, and everyone attacked you for saying that. Okay, think about that. Okay, just that one little fact, and think about all the other facts just like that. It's funny. There's a guy I listen to. He says a conspiracy theory is just the truth in 6 months from now. Basically, it just means if somebody says you're telling a conspiracy theory because you look at the facts in front of you and come to a logical conclusion, they say, oh no, that's wrong. We were told it's wrong. And then 6 months when it doesn't matter, they'll come out and say, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, you were right after all. Well, they won't say you were right after all, but they'll say this is right. And you're like, I told you that 6 months ago. They're like, no, that, it used to be this, blah, blah, blah. So they'll totally forget about it. We have the attention spans of goldfish in this country. It is ridiculous. Okay, so they cancel the truth and they promote non-truth. Create perversion, okay? We are the most perverse society, and Babylon was very perverse too, but we, of course, have technology, so we've taken our perversions to all new levels, and we are worse than they were in ancient Rome or Babylon as far as being just no rules. The only one rule that we still have left is adults aren't supposed to mess with kids. That's the only rule there is left in America that's even possibly enforced, although it's ignored all the time by people. But that's the only rule that is forbidden now. Anything else with perversion is completely accepted by everyone. Everything has to be allowed, no holds barred. So, I read the Bible and I believe that's right. And then the seventh thing that they did in Babylon is they castrated the youth. Okay, in Babylon, when they brought people into the palace, when they were young, they would take them in and they would remove their manhood and make them into eunuchs. They had eunuchs who served because eunuchs were very nice to have around because they didn't have to go and mess with wives or children and be distracted from their duties. Eunuchs you didn't have to worry about them messing with one of your daughters or with one of your wives in your harem. So again, that's why they kept eunuchs around, because the eunuchs were more easily controlled and loyal to the royalty because they were no longer men. They just looked like men, but they no longer could go around and breed. So what are we doing in our country? We're taking children and we're letting them switch sexes. And when that happens, if you have your manhood cut off, you're not going to be able to have a baby. And when you're a young lady and you take hormone blockers, you're not going to ovulate later in life. Okay, you no longer get to reproduce your own genetic offspring. If people say believe in the science, then my statement to them is science says that all creatures here on Earth have a drive to reproduce their own genetic offspring into the world and be successful. That's what truly motivates almost everyone through their life, is to have children, raise kids, them have children, have grandchildren, and prosper, right? That in our society is totally being thrown in the toilet. So it's really kind of a sick, demonic thing. And it makes you wonder who is pushing these agendas, because it's cutting the population down, it's keeping people from reproducing, it's keeping people from thinking about the future, because when you reproduce, you think about the future for your children and what things should be like. And it's kind of like the government wanting to switch people into being eunuchs again so that they'll behave and be obedient and not be a risk and not reproduce children. Only the royalty gets to do that, just like in Babylon. So, again, we in America are becoming just like Babylon. So my question is simple, is in the end times it says the horror of Babylon does this with their greed, their trade, their sexual immorality, their evil, their cup of wickedness that God has stored up to make them drink. Is America the whore of Babylon? I'm afraid that we fit all the prerequisites that Babylon did. And we're doing it right here in America, and it's just getting worse. So, I mean, I hope that we have a revival. I hope that in America we're able to have a few more years and we're able to turn the clock back and go to a more, swing the pendulum back to a moral stance and get rid of all this immorality, at least it being completely acceptable, at least get it to where it's like, okay, that behavior is not acceptable. Go keep it to yourself, but don't tell me I have to okay it. But again, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're just going to continue to get worse until the cup of God's wrath is poured out upon America, and we deserve what we get because, again, we've been warned. We should know better. So thank you for listening, and please, if you haven't accepted Jesus and given yourself to him and asked that he forgive your sins and that you repented and believe in God, please do that. You don't want to have God's wrath poured out on you someday. Thank you.